Well, you had it all figured out, didn't you? You were told, oh, the number one fantasy for all those babes I see at the beach is a guy in his underwear at 4 in the morning, illuminated by a 15-inch monitor, doing C++. Right. That's right. That's exactly what they dream of. So, if that's what you believe, you better get through Decode String, which says, given an encoded string, return its decoded string. The encoding rule is k encoded string, where the encoded string inside the square brackets is being repeated exactly k times. Notice that k is guaranteed to be a positive integer. Well, that's good. You may assume that the input string is always valid, no extra white spaces, square brackets are well formed, etc. Furthermore, you may assume that the original data does not contain any digits, and that digits are only for those repeat numbers, k. For example, there won't be input like 3a or 24. Okay, so what does this mean? So if we have 3 times a, you repeat the a 3 times, and then if you have 2bc, you repeat bc and bc again, so twice. Now, you have 3 times, but within this 3 something, you repeat c twice, so we should get c 6 times. So it's a and then 2 c's. So A2Cs, A2Cs, and A2Cs, which in Canada stands for the Air Canada Centre, or some bogus place where the Leafs are always losing. Okay, so this problem, this problem is actually a recursion problem. We could do it with a stack, but I find it more succinct and easier to do it or to think about it as recursion. Now, it is hard to think about this, and I admit I didn't immediately find the answer myself. So this is a model I took off the discussion pages, and in fact, I think this is the approved solution. The thing is, there's a lot of things to think about. Now, in an interview setting, you won't necessarily be able to decipher this the first time you see it, but if you study this, you'll realize, well, it's not that hard as long as I think about a couple of concepts. For example, what are we really looking at as we iterate through the string? We're looking at what happens if we have a number, what happens if we have an opening bracket, what happens if we have a letter, and what happens if we have a closing bracket. Those are 4 cases. So let's see how we could go about that. We're going to need a helper function. And as such, all we need to do is return helper, and we're throwing in s, and we're throwing in 0 as our position. So let's design the helper function, which will return, as you could tell, a string. Because if we're returning helper, it means that helper itself will return a string. So some sort of alarm ringing in the background, or some sort of fire truck. We're taking in a string s, and we're taking in the position over here, which we'll take as constant over here. And, well, actually, no. The reason why, maybe we should declare int position equals 0 over here and pass along position, since it might be easier, as we're going to be modifying position, and we can't necessarily pass it as a constant then, to deal with it this way. Okay, now that we got this, let's see how we go about this. Well, we're going to have to create some sort of word, and which starts off as nothing. That's the point of this whole thing. We're creating a word. And within the word, there's going to be some repetitions. And those repetitions are going to be a function of the number that we see here, which we're calling number. So let's iterate. So for, well, we already created our position over here. We know that position has to get to iterate up until S size, so it has to be smaller, and we increment position. Okay, so far so good. Let's see now. So remember our four cases. If it's a number, if it's an open bracket, if it's a letter, or if it's a closing bracket. Pretty clear. So let's start. If S position, so our string at position, equals, and here's our opening bracket, then how do we play this? Then we're going to have a string, and we'll call it my string equals helper, helper S, and then we're going to increment position over here. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that before passing POS over here, we're going to increment it. So in fact, we could have written it like this. I think this is clear. I happen to like these a little bit better. Once we do that, once we have the word that we need, we know that we're going to have to repeat it for the number of numbers. And you'll see that we know that once we reach this, we would have gotten the number first. So in fact, this will never be the first thing that we hit in the string. We'll always get a number first, so we're going to tackle that in about 2 seconds. So for int I equals 0, I smaller than num, I plus plus, and what do we do with that? Well, word plus equal my string. That's it. So it's my string that's being repeated X number of times, or rather, what is it? Num number of times. And then once we're done that, we set num equals 0 again. Okay, now we have another situation. Else if S posts, what did we say? So we had an open bracket, and now we want a closing bracket. If it's a closing bracket, we could just return the word. That's it. That's all we need to do. Let's see now. So this could either be kind of an inner type of call to helper, at which case it would be coming back here, and we'd be coming up with, what is it? The number of repetitions. So this is always some sort of inner type of recursion whenever you might encounter that. Else if S pose, what do we say? Equals, what is it? Equals, okay, so actually we have a little function here, is digit S pose. So if this is true, then num equals num times 10 plus S position minus the character 0. Okay, this is kind of a standard conversion to a digit. Now we could have used, let's see now, a toy, I believe. A toy would have given that. Or is that a toy the contrary? I don't even remember now. Else, now if we actually encounter a character, then we could just do word plus equal S pose. And at the end of all this, why is this for loop? Okay, here. At the end of all this, all we want to do is return the word. So does this work? And it's taking an inordinate amount of time. When it does that, I just select everything. I hit refresh. So LeetCode always, or very often, has these kind of strange moments. Let's run the code over here. It gave AAA over here. Could this be vis-a-vis my not incrementing over here. So that was good. Okay, so word equals my string, num equals 0. So okay, this seems okay. If s digit s pose num equals num times 10 plus, okay. Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay, we have a winner. And the reason it was doing that is we have to modify the position. Yeah, it can't be passed by value over here. And if you look at it, you might see why. In fact, I might need to see why too. Okay, this leads me to think I need to study this a little bit more. Thanks a lot, everyone, and so should you if you don't immediately see this. But I think we have the bare bones systems. Let's study each of the cases. What happens when you hit a bracket? What happens when you hit the closing bracket? What happens when it's is digit s position? Oh, okay, now another way of writing this. Another way of writing this is else if s pose bigger or equal to 0 and s pose smaller equal to 9. So that makes it a digit over here. And let's see what happens. So same thing. If you don't remember the is digit, you could always use this thing over here. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good day.